he moved around a lot, and I had
Hmm.
a rabbi from the Temple Bethel tell me that that was very common back then.
Hmm.
Uh, and Abraham lived in Youngstown. Oh no, yeah, Youngstown in 1842,
Hmm.
Youngstown, Ohio, and then moved to Louisville in
Hmm.
1850.
Hmm.
Then, 1848 went to Nashville. Then 1850 went to Louisville. Then 1853 through 54 went back to Nashville.
Hmm.
And by 1855 he was in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Hmm.
And he in each of those places he started a imported French wine, champagne. Companies, successful ones in all
Hmm.
of those cities.
It's interesting because one thing I cannot help but think about is that him as an immigrant Jew to this country of he was it because he still had networks of friends or family back in Europe that he was more easily like a sense of trust to be able to import these products?
Yeah, that's speculation, but I'm
Mhm.
fairly positive that
Yeah.
he was using his connections in France to
Hmm.
introduce these brandies, especially brandy and even absinthe to the South. Once he got into Nashville and Knoxville, he wasn't quite familiar with all the rules. We can get to him say, selling to a slave in a little bit, but
Oh, right, that incident. So there's a really interesting book by a professor at I think Georgia State University. Her name is Professor Marnie Davis. So she came out with a book like a dozen years ago called Jews and Booze, but it was about Jews basically in the 19th and the early 20th century and how the reason that a lot of Jews, especially in the late 19th century, so that's what we're talking about, a lot of Jews got involved, especially in distilling, but in booze more generally in America, was because similar like a lot of Jews were largely closed off from a lot of occupations when they were in Europe, and so a lot of
Mhm.
them turned to money lending but also alcohol. And so when they came to America, and now I'm thinking about your great great grandfather, when he came to America, I wonder if he had that in his background. He had it maybe in his family. They were involved, one, whether producers or retailers or distributors, that they were involved in the alcohol industry. So coming to America was an opportunity for him to tap into his networks.
Alsatia, which is where he was from,
Hmm.
Alsatia,
Hmm.
is a heavy wine community. I mean
Hmm.
it's a wine section, and throughout his and then Manny's life, they were importing from France. And
Hmm.
Miles Salcott, we can get to later, he would spend 3 or 4 months a year in France buying alcohol for the George Dickel Company and sending it back. He
Hmm.
was a part.
Hmm. Wow. Did you mention a couple of minutes ago about introducing brandy and absinthe to the South?
Well, I would assume that he was one of the first companies to be doing that. I mean,
Huh.
back I don't know that for positive, but there was a lot of whiskey being consumed in the South. There
Hmm.
was a lot of beer being consumed,
Hmm.
and a lot of Germans, Jewish Germans, bringing over different types of beer,
Hmm.
but champagne and liqueurs aren't something that people talk about a lot, during that
Hmm.
period of time. And
Right.
I think the uniqueness of it was probably part of his draw and
Hmm.
why he was very successful.
You're right, because wine was not a big product in the mid to late 19th century in general in America. And so I can imagine, especially like a distilled wine for brandy would be even less so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
interesting.
and he sold cigars also.